All right. We have our recording started. Let me go ahead and jump in. Thanks for joining me tonight again. My name is Mr. Bober, and we are doing our first live from the library for this school year. And we thought we'd kick it off with talking about the benefits of ebooks and audiobooks, and specifically using Sora. We had our second, third, fourth, and fifth grade students get introduced to Sora or review Sora this past week. And so they are familiar with using that on their school devices, their iPads, their Chromebooks, but it is also something that they can use at home on personal devices or family devices. So I wanted to just kind of explore a little bit about ebooks and audiobooks, and then go do a little bit of a quick tour of Sora and talk about how you sign up and register for that, and then take any questions that we have. We'll keep it quick, short, and sweet, but the goal here is just to give you one more option to access literature and to access information for your kids when you're at home. So I want to start off by just talking about the benefits of audiobooks. And actually, as I was kind of looking together and doing my research, there's actually several more than this, but I picked six that I thought could resonate with some folks tonight. First of all, it builds listening skills. The idea that kids, and if you're an audiobook listener, you know this, have to actually kind of concentrate on the spoken word when they're listening to an audiobook for it to register is something that is new to some students, especially when we talk about the stamina of reading when they're reading a book. That stamina of listening is also something that gets built through listening to audiobooks. And young kids might notice that, or you might notice about your kids, they can only listen to so much of an audiobook at a time before they start kind of tuning out. That is something that builds over time as they're listening to more and more. And again, if you're an audiobook listener yourself, you may have had a similar experience. One thing I read in several different spots, and this was based off of some scientific studies, is that it can also help us relax and refocus our minds. So if we are someone who is at the moment anxious about something, who is nervous about something, who is just maybe a little overexcited about something, having your mind focus on that audiobook, partially because of the story or information and the processing of that, partially because of the auditory nature of it, it can actually relax our minds and focus our minds and kind of take some of those moments of either anxiety or frustration or some of those negative feelings that we sometimes have or that our kids sometimes have, and actually help minimize those through the use of audiobooks. So I thought that that was a really fascinating study that I saw referenced in several different spots. It can also give some levels of accessibility for students with challenges with reading print. Now, this can mean a whole lot of different things. So, for example, we can look at something like a student that might have challenges because of a dyslexia diagnosis. We could also look, though, at a student who wants to reach a certain level of reading that might be beyond what they can do with reading out of a print book or an ebook at that particular moment. The auditory processing that is done can often be done with a higher language level and at a higher level of complexity than we can do with actually reading off of the page. So again, this might not be something we want to do with everything we read, but there might be moments where a kid really wants to access a particular book, and listening to that book might be something that it might be a way for them to do that as opposed to being able to read the actual print version itself. Of course, if we're thinking about when we're listening to an audiobook, we might also be thinking about this idea that listening to an audiobook is better than reading it off of a screen. And that's something that I think is probably pretty self-explanatory. And we probably know that because we see all the information about screen time. Of course, kids are often maybe not reading off of a screen at night anyway, but even that idea of being able to listen to an audiobook for 10 or 20 minutes with the lights dimmed and off as opposed to the entire bedroom lit up, or even that bright night light on our book, might be a way that kind of calms the body and brings us down in a more relaxed way in the evening. So it might be something where a kid is just listening to a special audiobook right before bedtime, just like maybe they listen to a parent or an adult in their life read a story to them. Could be a very similar type of experience. Also, I think one thing that's great about audiobooks is they can be really family events. It's not just your kid that might be listening to that audiobook. It might be all of you. Now, it could, of course, be something tied around to a moment when everybody's together, like a trip, a long car ride, something like that. I know families that have done audiobooks specifically around those times. But even if you're doing a 5 or 10 minute listen as you're heading home and putting it on a speaker on your car or on your phone that everyone gets a chance to listen to together, that kind of shared story experience could be one that is really enjoyable for everybody, and I think can be a real benefit to audiobooks. Another thing that we saw when doing just a personal test around audiobooks here at Captain, and this was a couple of years ago, is one thing that our students reported is as they were listening to audiobooks, they were catching word pronunciations faster and in different ways than they would have when they were reading a book and wouldn't necessarily know how a particular word sounds or how it's pronounced. This actually is supported by other study findings as well, and you can see this in some of the literature around benefits of audiobooks. Our kids were also talking about the additional layers of understanding that were going on around voice actors, maybe background music that might be in an audiobook, all of these different layers that help them understand the story and connect with the story and engage with the story in different ways. So again, not that audiobooks are wonderful all of the time. I definitely go back and forth between reading print and reading digitally and listening to audio, but there are certain pluses that I think that are worth knowing about. Now, I think another big plus is, and one thing that is important to know, is that there are studies out there that show that audiobooks have the same cognitive benefits as print or ebooks. I often, I shouldn't say often, I sometimes hear an adult say, well, if they're listening to an audiobook, they're not really reading. And this particular study, while it is not the same phonetic reading of the language, and that's a completely different thing, and I can and 100% acknowledge that. This particular study was looking at how the brain activated when it heard certain words, when it was listening to or reading a particular story or a moment in a piece of information. They used nonfiction informational text and fictional story text within the study, and the brain activated in the same way. And their conclusion was that the learning and the understanding that was being formed by interacting with the print book or the textbook or the audiobook was essentially the same because the brain was being activated in the same way. Now, when we look at ebooks, there's some other benefits, and these maybe are a little more obscure because when we think about comparing ebooks to print books, there's a lot more similarities. But I think there's some things that are worth pointing out. One of them is instant access. And if you are like some parents that I know, myself at times as well, like sometimes that kid wants that book right away. And sometimes if you don't have the opportunity to run to the library or the bookstore or wherever you might get your books, being able to download and access that book immediately so they can start reading, or at the very least find something to read immediately, is a real plus. We also have in ebooks adjustable fonts and backgrounds, and those can help readers focus. Those can help readers target in on certain blocks of text in ways that maybe print books cannot. As a matter of fact, when we purchase print books for the library, one of the things I look at is how small and condensed is the print. And there are books that sometimes we pass up because the publisher has printed them in a way that is not very accessible and friendly to kids, even though it's a kid's book. You can bypass all of that when you deal with ebooks because you have the ability to make those adjustments and set certain settings that are going to be friendly for your particular child and their preferences. In Sora specifically, there are several reading and vocabulary support features. So you can go through and mark up and look up information from within an ebook. One thing specifically that I teach students to do is to use the dictionary feature in there. So if there's a word that they're running across and they can't understand what that word means contextually, or they just are unfamiliar with that word, there's a way to very quickly look up that word, popping right up on the screen, and then go right back into the story. So there's some supports in there that some of our students utilize, and I think all students could really benefit from. Another thing that's really handy with Sora is you can actually sync across devices. And so we regularly have kids who forget their books at school or forget their books at home. And I'll have kids come in and they'll say, well, do you have this book? Because I accidentally left my copy at home and I just want to read for the day, which of course we accommodate and is never a problem. But when they are using ebooks, they are able to pick up multiple devices and it automatically syncs. So, for example, if they are reading off of their Chromebook a particular story and they have a personal tablet or there's a family computer or whatever the case is, they're picking up mom or dad's phone, they're able to open up Sora if their account is logged in, and it opens up directly. When they open that book, it opens up directly to the last page they were on that other device. So not only do the books themselves sync across devices, but the actual place where they stopped syncs across devices. And it's a nice way to just make it easy, maybe for all of us who sometimes forget certain things at certain places or just don't have to want to worry about keeping the spot in the book. Another nice thing is returns are extremely easy because Sora automatically returns books for kids after 2 weeks. Students do have the opportunity to renew that. And we talk about that when we go over Sora and how that works. And we can actually, if we have a kid who needs a book for a longer time, we can technically assign that book for weeks and weeks if that's something that is helpful for that particular child. But the returns are really easy. You don't have to worry about lost books and making sure books get back into backpacks or anything like that because it's all kind of built into the system. And then lastly, one thing that I always promote to students is just that Sora is a great travel option. So whether they are taking a weekend trip or they are doing a big spring break or winter break trip, or even they're just on a long car ride, whatever the case may be, as long as they're, of course, someone who reads well in a car, and I know not everybody does, but that Sora is a great trip or great option because you can download your books, you can have them ready for you, ebooks or audiobooks, and they are just there for you in one small device, as opposed to, and I do this myself when I go on a trip, I go to a conference, I'm packing 2 or 3 books in my carry-on, and sometimes it just takes up a lot of space. And so if you have a kid or my goodness, kids who do that, that can be tricky. And also, I know a lot of people don't like to keep track of books, especially library books or school books on trips like that. So Sora is a really good option for that reason as well. All right. So I did want to go ahead and spend a few minutes just taking a look at Sora. You can get Sora or get to Sora in 2 ways. You can go to the website, which is soraapp.com. And so if you're on a computer, that's really the only way you're going to do that. If you are on a tablet or a phone, the preferred way to do it then is actually download the Sora app from whatever the app store is for your particular device. There is, of course, no cost for this. Also, if you're a public library user, this is going to be very much akin to Libby. It is in the same family. They are both under the Overdrive umbrella. And you can actually, through Sora, connect your public library card and your Clayton library card both into the same search, so that if you are searching across all kinds or multiple devices, which is a plus. All right, so let me jump out of this and jump over to here. And I think I might need to stop sharing and start sharing again right away. So let me just jump from one right into the other. There we go. This is my Sora app, and this is exactly what it would look like, except for it's kind of spread wide. If I were on my phone, it would look exactly the same. I tell my students that you have a few options in Sora. Of course, you have your books that you have checked out. Now, those are going to be on the shelf. Those are the shelf icon in that lower left corner. You can see I've got this book, Rebellion 1776, that I'm almost finished with reading. I'll probably finish it tonight. And then I've got this audiobook, The First State of Being, which I'm also almost finished with listening to. I'll probably finish that this weekend. You are allowed through Clayton to check out up to 3 books at a time through Sora. If you have your public library card connected with this as well, you can check out however many books they allow you to check out from their library as well. So you could have many more than those 3 books here. And it also keeps track of all of your history. So I've been showing this to students. So I've got magazines and all kinds of stuff that I was showing students. But the reason that this is a plus is that if your child accidentally has a book returned or they aren't able to renew a book, if they borrow that book again, it again comes back exactly where they left off. If it got returned and they were on page 100, they check that book out again and they open it up, it opens right up to page 100 again. So it's very friendly for those types of things. If there have any holds, that's going to show up right here, and it's going to show them how long that hold's going to be. I let the students know that if they are ever seeing a hold for something they want to read or they want to listen to, and the wait is longer than 4 weeks, please come talk to me immediately and I will buy additional copies. I've made a lot of great Sora purchases just this last week from kids who either had longer waits or they were looking for books that weren't on Sora. And again, as long as it's available and it's elementary appropriate, I will purchase it for Sora. Speaking of elementary appropriate, when students are exploring, and I'm going to click on this explore button in the lower left corner, the books that they're going to see are all elementary appropriate. They're all approved for kids in grades K through 5. Now, that does mean that if your first grader is browsing Sora, they're going to see books that would be really more deemed for a 4th or 5th grader, but you can rest assured that you're not going to see young adult material or adult material or anything like that. When you are doing the exploration, there are 2 main ways to find books. You can browse for books and you can search for books. So browsing, you can just browse these collections. These collections are not ones that I put together or even that Clayton puts together. Clayton is part of a larger consortium of Missouri districts and schools that share part of our collection. And then we also have our separate Clayton collection. When I make those individual purchases for students, those are part of our individual Clayton collection. And both of those get searched and shown results for when you do any kind of searching or browsing. The user doesn't see any difference. So something like Hispanic Heritage Month, of course, will be here for a month. That'll be gone in just a few days, along with a new collection. We have fall reads, pages to stream, books made into TVs and movies. And you can notice here that you see the headphone icon for audiobooks, and you don't see that icon if it's an ebook. You might also notice that it shows that there are more books in that particular collection. And if I click through on that, I can start to scroll down and see an entire collection. As I do that, you're going to notice that some of these books you'll have to place a hold on, and you can see how long that hold is going to be by clicking on the clock. You can listen to a sample if it's an audiobook, or read a sample if it's an ebook, and you'll have some books that just say borrow that you're ready to borrow and access right away. I'm going to go ahead and click back. I can go and continue browsing through. Some of these are Missouri State award nominees. And so if we look at, let me browse down to the Trumans, I think are the first ones to show up. They're the Truman Award nominees. This is a list of books that are for grades 6 through 8. Again, the reason that we see them in this particular collection is because publishers and reviewers say that these books are also appropriate for, more than likely, if I would go check each and individual one of them, upper elementary students. So for example, The Labors of Hercules Beale, which is a great book, by the way, definitely appropriate for even our 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade students to read or listen to. And the same would be true of any books that we would see here. If we look at Dogwood is a nonfiction list that comes out through the state of Missouri. You'll notice here we have a K through 2 list, a 3 through 5 list, 6 through 8. Again, these particular titles that are available to us are elementary appropriate. And you'll even notice the 9 through 12 list. Notice there's only 2 books available here, Enigma Girls, both in audiobook and ebook, and The Girl Who Sang. That's because those are the only 2 titles on that 9 through 12 list that are elementary appropriate. So again, it filters everything for our kids here at Captain. We also have the Denny O'Neil list, which is a graphic novel list, by the way. So if you've got kids who are enjoy graphic novels, they can use that Denny O'Neil list, K through 2, 3 through 5, and there will be some books on the 6 through 8 list as well that they may be interested in. So we can browse, but we can also search for books. And so when students search for books, they can either search for topics, like a nonfiction topic, they can search for an author, a series, or an individual book. So if I'm searching for a topic, if I want to read about dogs, nonfiction books for dogs, I can just type in dogs. It's going to show me whatever books are available. And because I typed in dogs, you're also going to get fiction books about dogs, but students are usually pretty adept at saying, yep, that looks like fiction, or that looks like nonfiction just by the cover. And if you're not sure, you can open it up and read a sample. If I want to search for a series, I have Big Nate right next to me in the library here. So I'm going to type in Big Nate, and I can see all the Big Nate books that are available. Notice if I scroll down far enough, I get a see more. That means there's more results, and I want to click on that to see all my results. You will eventually see results that are kind of like Big Nate, but they're not Big Nate, like this Bigfoot and Littlefoot collection here. But all the books at the top are going to be Big Nate books. And then I mentioned you could search for an author. I'm going to search for Adam Gidwitz because I just read a great book by him. It happened to be this Max in the House of Spies, and Max in the Land of Lies is the sequel. It's an excellent 2-book series if you're into kind of historical fiction. And so we can see Adam's books that are available right here. And then I mentioned also that you can search for an individual book. I'm going to go ahead and search for, I'm looking over on my shelves real quick to see what's popping out at me for an individual book. What about this book called, oh, what about iFunny? Oh, and see, we notice here that that particular book is not available. We have other books that are, but that particular one's not showing up. Here would be a great example. If a student wanted that book, they can come to me and say, Mr. Bober, I want to read that book or listen to that book, and I will definitely order that for them. The nice thing about Sora is that if I order a print book, usually that takes 1 to 2 weeks. By the time I order it, it comes into the bookstore, I pick it up, we process it. There's just a lot of steps in that process. When we order a book for Sora through Overdrive, that's a much shorter process. I put the book in a cart. I message one person to purchase that cart, and within about 2 hours, it shows up in Sora to be able to be checked out. That can often happen that day, and it's typically the next day at the longest, or the next work day at the longest for that to happen. So that's a pretty quick process, and I think that's another real nice benefit for kids to be able to use Sora. I wanted to mention, and let me go ahead and stop sharing here, just a couple of things that are really good to know when we're talking about let me go ahead and do this. When we're talking about setting up Sora on a family device or on your personal phone, you can go ahead and download that Sora app and put it, for example, on your personal phone, and then sign in as your child. You will need a couple of pieces of information. You're going to need your child's email address, your Clayton email address. Sometimes the kids know that. It's that first digit of their first name, their last name, a couple of numbers, and then at claytonschools.net. So they'll need that piece of information. They'll also need their password for that, which is the letter S, and then their student number, which is a 6-digit number. And again, there's a lot of kids who know that, but if either of those 2 pieces are things that you don't know or you need to know to set up Sora, Sora on your family device or your personal device, just send me an email and I'll be glad to reply back and get you that information so that you can set up Sora on a personal device. Other than that, you're basically just browsing and it's going to ask you to look for your school. You're actually going to be looking for your district. You're going to look for Clayton School District. It is also sometimes referred to as MoreNet. And so you might see Clayton School District and MoreNet side by side. MoreNet is just the name of that big consortium that I mentioned of districts and schools across the state of Missouri that we are in partnership with to bring even more books to our students. So that is an overview of Sora, along with some reasons that I think ebooks and audiobooks are really great to bring into our lives. If you have any questions, I have a few minutes left until 7:30, and you are welcome to unmute and ask that question. And if not, we can call it a night. And again, I want to thank you for joining me. So if there's any questions out there, go ahead and unmute and ask. All right. I think we are all good. Again, as you're setting up, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, let me know. And thanks for joining me. We'll do another live from the library next month. If you have a topic that you are really interested in knowing more about with regard to anything around libraries, just shoot me an email or catch me somewhere at school, and I would be glad to add that into our list of our live from the library topics that we're going to be doing in the future. I hope everybody has a good night, and thanks again for joining.